We have all been there, staring at a textbook, highlighting paragraph after paragraph, rereading the same page until the words blur together. You close the book feeling completely prepared. Then, the next morning, your mind goes entirely blank. Yet in that exact same classroom or office, someone else seems to absorb that identical material in a fraction of the time. They effortlessly remember the steps, the names, and the complex systems, while the rest of us sit quietly wondering what secret they are hiding. We assume fast learners were born with better hardware, a larger memory capacity, faster processing speeds, or superior raw intelligence. Cognitive science tells a different story. The gap between a fast learner and a slow one comes down to a practice called metacognition, literally thinking about your own thinking. Fast learners actively observe, critique, and regulate exactly how they are processing new information. Learning speed is not a fixed genetic trait. It is a specific, repeatable system of cognitive regulation, a set of mental tools anyone can adopt to rewire their own brain. The biological process of deep learning begins long before you read the first sentence of a new subject. It requires deliberate mental preparation. Psychologists call these mental frameworks schemas. Your brain does not store new facts in an empty void. For a memory to stick, it has to click into an existing pattern. This explains why experts learn advanced material in half the time. They possess an enormous, dense scaffolding of foundational knowledge, allowing every incoming detail to rapidly attach to something they already know. To forge those connections, your brain requires an intense amount of unbroken attention. The human brain cannot multitask. When you try to juggle reading with checking a notification, your brain rapidly switches between tasks, and every single switch drains cognitive resources. Metacognitive learners fiercely protect their focus to manage this cognitive load. Instead of drifting through a 4-hour study session with a phone on the desk, they engage in short, highly intense bursts of deep work when their mental energy is at its peak. Without building that foundational schema, and without strict focus, the brain simply lacks the processing capacity to embed new information. The hours spent studying are wasted effort. Once you are engaged with the material, the metacognitive process moves into a constant state of monitoring. You must continuously ask yourself if you are actually absorbing the concepts or merely recognizing the words. Reading the same page 3 times builds recognition memory. It creates a feeling of familiarity, which the brain easily confuses with actual mastery. Recognition is shallow and fades quickly. True learning requires retrieval memory, which is durable. To build retrieval memory, you have to use a technique called active recall. This means closing the book, looking away from the screen, and forcing your brain to reconstruct the information entirely from scratch. This chart shows the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, modeling how new information decays rapidly over time. Every time active recall forces a retrieval, it interrupts that decay, driving retention back up and making the resulting memory trace stronger. Another effective monitoring tool is verbal mediation, or simply talking to yourself. Abraham Lincoln famously read aloud to himself, noting that the practice doubled his retention by forcing his mind to actively process and verbalize every concept. This entire monitoring phase is supposed to be uncomfortable. The brain has to strain to retrieve facts. If your study session feels effortless and smooth, you are likely only experiencing familiarity, and no real learning is happening. The process continues even after you close the book. The final phase is a critical audit, where you step back to evaluate your progress, identify your roadblocks, and allow the brain to physically consolidate the data. Consider the classic metacognitive piano teacher. Instead of immediately pointing out a missed note or a rushed tempo, the teacher sits in total silence, waiting for the student to listen to their own playing and identify the error themselves. This forces the student to do the analytical heavy lifting. Through Socratic questioning, the student transitions from a dependent pupil waiting for instructions into an independent learner who can correct their own mistakes. This audit requires a growth mindset. When metacognitive learners hit a wall, they treat that failure as objective feedback on their current strategy, rather than a verdict on their intelligence. The final physical step of this evaluation phase is sleep. During deep sleep, the brain actively replays the day's experiences, strengthens the neural pathways connected to the new information, and clears out metabolic waste. Honestly auditing your failures and protecting your physical rest are the exact mechanisms that stabilize and finalize your mental effort. It is easy to dismiss these strategies as mere study hacks, but researchers are finding that these processes are rooted in something far deeper than classroom technique. When laboratory rats perform memory tasks, they will consistently decline to take a test if they recognize the material is too difficult. They are effectively monitoring their own internal states. Demonstrating an awareness of what we know and what we don't is an ancient biological function. Adopting this system allows a learner to diagnose their own mistakes and accelerate their own progress without needing a teacher to manage the process. It turns learning from a passive event into a controllable skill. As the writer James Clear noted, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." Fast learning is the direct byproduct of these deliberate systems. The next time you sit down with a difficult problem, stop asking yourself if you are smart enough to learn it. The only question that actually matters is, am I learning this the right way?